Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /EntitledPeople, where people truly believe that they can do what they want, when they want, and nobody else matters. And in today's episode, it's all about parents who overstep boundaries, guys. We've got Karen parents trying to end relationships, wanting their kids' houses, invading privacy. It's a wild one. I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So to start, I bought a small starter home during the housing market crash, completely by myself. I lived there for a better part of a decade before buying a larger home with my now husband. My parents really wanted to live there because it was small and easy to maintain. They foreclosed in the past, so no way would they be capable of someone giving them a mortgage. Also, my dad is retired and my mom doesn't work. They want to rent for me, and for a discounted rent price, they paid off the mortgage, let's say $50,000, with an over six-figure inheritance my parents got. So a lease was written, explaining it was a prepayment of rent, and their rent would only be taxes and insurance, and they would pay like $350 a month, basically only going up when taxes and insurance goes up. So we signed the lease with all the other typical stuff in it and had it notarized, and that's how it's been for a while now. So just to be clear, I'm not making an effing dime on this house. I recently told them the rent would go up by $3 whole. Yes, $3 effing because of a slight insurance increase. And my mother lost her lid. She claimed I'm a money-hungry bitch and that she was gonna rip out everything she did, the garden and other cosmetic changes. She also said I owe her and I can't evict her because it's her house. She then said that she's not responsible for the insurance. The lease says otherwise, that the insurance hasn't been raised in a decade, and that I'm trying to make her pay my personal homeowner's insurance. That a court will show me that and give her my house. And again, we have a notarized lease, and they're listed as tenants. I'm the only one on the deed. My father demanded the bills to see if I'm ripping them off. And P.S., this house is a commutable distance from effing Manhattan, so a studio apartment around here is like $1,500. And this is a house with a large yard for their dog. I can easily get $2,000 for this house, even before they moved in. I sent them copies of the taxes and insurance showing only their address. And P.S., I'm charging them discounted taxes, as you can get a discount for paying in full 90 days early. I told them to add and divide by 12, and then told my mom to talk to a lawyer so they can slap them straight. I guess my father agreed with me because now she's divorcing my father. Also, she threatens divorce all the time. I doubt she'll actually go through with it. Honestly, guys, that would be wild if mom actually divorced dad over that. Like, how dare you side with our daughter and not me? With that said, freaking entitled parents, hey? You are our daughter, so we'll basically live in your house and you'll take whatever we pay you. And this is what's hard about renting to family, guys. Like, some people literally feel that since you're related, they can get special treatment. And honestly, it's even harder when it's your parents that pull stuff like this, because most kids love their parents, right? Like, it's hard to evict mom and dad. But in reality, if OP sent them the eviction notice and let her try that stuff in court, I guarantee the judge will not give mom the house like she thinks. And this person comments, so what I'm hearing is that dad's gonna be living in the house and mom can F all the way off, right? But yeah, jokes aside, all of this headache over a $3 a month increase, guys. In my opinion, maybe OP should start looking at renting to people who will pay fair market price for their place. Okay, so this is a long one, but I hope it's worth the read. My parents have long been a pain in my ass, but for now, I'm going to mainly focus on my Thanksgiving from hell and the incidents leading up to it. So a few years ago, I met my future wife on an online dating app. We hit it off fairly quickly, and the relationship progressed really fast. I was in my late 20s, and she turned 30 soon after we met. We both had a good idea of what we were looking for in a partner, and we had no interest in games. I met her parents within a few months, though I was much more reluctant to introduce her to mine, for reasons that'll become apparent. The problems began almost as soon as I told my folks I was dating someone. This was about 6 months into my relationship, as I was reluctant to inform my parents, due to the fact that they tried to call the cops on my last girlfriend. So the day this happened, myself, my brother, and my parents We're having dinner at a local Mexican restaurant and making small talk. They then start asking me questions about my girlfriend, mostly the usual innocent questions. But at some point, I let it slip that she was Jewish, and oh boy, was that a mistake, as my parents are hyper-conservative Christians. Now, for years, they'd been trying to get me to date a girl from our church, who happened to be a good friend of mine, but we were never really a match to be a couple, and they always expected that I would marry someone who was at least a Christian. Now, I'm Christian to this day, but I rarely have interactions with the church, due to some incidents with the priest. And no, not that kind of incident. My dad, without missing a beat, told me that I should break up with her. He told me that I was going to marry a Christian girl, and that was that. Hearing him say that, I was pissed, and I don't remember the full extent of that conversation. But I told him I was not breaking up with her, and of course, the rest of the dinner was tense. The next couple of months went about as smooth as you can imagine, but I thought I was only wearing them down. At some point, they invite my girlfriend and I for dinner, and I thought there was finally some progress being made. But no. They got my brother to distract me in another room of the house, while they sat down with my girlfriend and explained why she wasn't good for me. They straight up told my girlfriend that she needs to break up with me because I was going to marry a good Christian girl. They even offered to pay her for leaving me. My girlfriend politely told them off and we left. She told me that my dad offered her like $100. So fast forward to November. My family is really big on the holidays, as I know many are, and we have very large extended family gatherings for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think in my entire life, we had only missed one of these events. I wanted to go, and I wanted to take my girlfriend to meet the rest of my family. My parents may have had their heads up their asses, but the rest of my family has always seemed really great to me. The event would be at my grandmother's house this year, my mom's mother, with a small gathering from my dad's side the day before Thanksgiving. I talked to my grandmother, who was fine with me bringing my girlfriend, as long as she slept in a separate room. Which is no problem because there's no way that I'm gonna do anything with my girlfriend in my grandma's house. I decide to ask my mom as well. Not that I needed her permission, but I'm an optimist, and I hope that she would be on board, and maybe seeing my girlfriend having positive interactions with the family would help the situation. My mother was resistant at first, mainly because she was still upset that we're getting an apartment together, and she did not want to encourage the relationship further, but eventually she agreed. I should also note that I set some very clear boundaries with my mother about conversation for this trip, which she brushed off as unnecessary, but I had my guard up nonetheless. So with that, we head to my grandmother's city, and frankly, the first day's nothing but pleasant. My girlfriend gets to meet both my grandmothers, some of my cousins, and my extended family. We're having a fairly good time, and I think things are going well, until my girlfriend and I decide to go to a movie. My brother, who's 5 years older than me, wants to tag along. He rode up with my parents, and my girlfriend and I come up in my car, so my brother has to ride with us to the movie. The three of us sit together, and my girlfriend and I hold hands throughout the movie. It was a fantastic movie, and the ending was emotional, so I hold my girlfriend. Now, all the cuddles had not sat well with my brother, who is single. That's when he gets up, and I'll never forget what he said, or the malicious tone in which he said it. He said straight to us, "Too bad mom and dad will never let you marry her because she's not Christian." My brother then gets up and jogs out of the theater before my girlfriend and I could muster up a response. We just sat there a bit, dumbfounded for a few moments. Eventually, the house lights went up in the theater, and we tried to formulate a plan. I have no idea where my brother is at this point, but he can't go far considering we drove him. That's when I decide to call my folks, considering I have no clue where he is, and I really don't want to talk to him at this point. And to my surprise, my mom sides with me and tells me it's alright if we leave him, and he can get an Uber back. Now, we do half consider it, but we find him on the way out, and my girlfriend, who's used to dealing with a-holes and children in her job, completely cows him with words. He silently rides back with us, and we drop him off. My girlfriend and I go to have dinner by ourselves. At this point, we debate on just leaving, because nothing good can come after this, as my dad's gonna ask what happened, but we decide that my parents themselves have not crossed any boundaries we set. So we'll stay for now. But it would not take them long though. That same evening, I was getting ready to watch some Netflix in bed with my girlfriend. And no, nothing untoward was gonna happen. As I walk past the living room, my mom calls me in, and she complains that I'm not spending enough time with my family. Hearing that, I'm a bit angry at this manipulation tactic from my mom, but I go chat for my grandma's sake. My mom tries to tell me that my grandmother's upset with me, that my girlfriend and I are planning to move in together before we're married. I decide that my grandma does not need my mom being a mouthpiece for her. So I sit on the couch in between the two of them and face my grandmother. My grandmother and I chat. She is a bit worried about me moving in with a woman while unwed, but we calmly discuss the situation. She doesn't back down on her objection, but eventually she concedes that it's my life, that she likes my girlfriend and she's happy for us regardless. This entire time, my mother has constantly been trying to butt in on the conversation, but I'm physically putting myself between her and my grandma, which is pissing my mother off. Eventually, my father sees what's going on, and he also butts in. Apparently, he can't contain himself though, and he goes off about everything he sees wrong with my relationship. Now, I can't remember his exact gripes because I likely tuned them out, but I did call him a coward for talking crap behind my girlfriend's back, and this really pissed him off, so he storms out to fetch my girlfriend. He came back with my girlfriend in tow, and he proceeds to scream at her in front of all of us. My grandma was absolutely mortified that this was happening in her house. My dad screamed, "My son will be Christian, his wife will be Christian, his children will be baptized in our church. You two don't belong together." Like the guy was screaming at her. He also basically accused her of trying to steal my inheritance by getting knocked up by me, and then added some very inappropriate commentary, how he knew my girlfriend was getting older and her biological clock was ticking down, so she's trying to trap me. Throughout the whole tirade, my girlfriend just sat there quietly. Like I said, she's used to dealing with a-holes and she's tough as nails. She lets him finish up, and that's when my girlfriend turns to my grandma and she thanked her for her hospitality, before turning back to my father and asking, "Why did you even invite us here if you were going to act like this?" My dad starts yelling again and says, "We did not invite you here. We never would have invited you here. He did." At this point, I just gleefully pull my phone out and show him the conversation I had with my mom, where she agreed for my girlfriend to be here. My dad could not find his words, but he just glared at my mom. At this point, I told him that my girlfriend and I were leaving. It was near 11 o'clock at night, but we packed up the car and left for our hometown. My dad got one more word in before we left. He said, "You two had better have broken up by the time you got home. Have a long, hard thought about your future. You don't belong in my family." He said that while pointing at my girlfriend, to which I just laughed as we got in the car. My girlfriend and I drove home on pure adrenaline. We alternated between angry, humiliation, and frustration at the whole thing. This story does have something of a happy ending though. In the days that followed, we got a lot of calls and messages of support from my relatives. It turns out my brother made some vague social media post how he was sad for me and asking everyone to pray for my brother, referring to me. Apparently, many of my relatives took this to mean that I had been hurt, and they were all calling my mother and father. When my parents were forced to explain the situation, all of my relatives sided with my girlfriend and I. In the months that followed, this incident caused my grandmother to think back on how she acted with her own daughters. It turns out that my mother had been the only marriage out of 3 daughters that my grandmother had approved of. This incident made my grandma realize that she had acted poorly with her other daughters, and she came to them to finally mend those old wounds. Now, I had no idea, as it always seemed like my grandmother and her daughters had a great relationship. But these were old wounds that had just scabbed rather than really healed. Overall, my family got a lot closer because of this. In addition, my father's had a dramatic change over the course of the years. We almost didn't invite him to our wedding, but my dad ends up being the happiest person there when my girlfriend and I tied the knot. This has been helped by the fact that he's discovered some underlying mental health issues after that Thanksgiving, and the meds that he's using are truly helping him. He started acting like the father I loved when I was a kid. And yes, my dad was probably the worst person in this story, but I can't understate just how much he's changed since then. He was so filled with joy when my wife and I said that we were going to start trying for a kid after moving to our new house. On the other hand, my mother has not changed. She's still mad at the fact that she can't control my wife and I. My mother is still a problem, and boy do I have more stories. But she's mostly behaving because she knows that my wife and I can and will block her from seeing her future grandchildren. And to all the people who ask why my wife actually stayed with me through all this, I completely get where you're coming from. Sometimes even I don't know why she stayed. In the end, I think this all worked out with us together because we're a team. And it may have sounded, from the way I described the story, that I wasn't standing up for her. But my wife and I talked extensively before each encounter with my parents, and we set up clear boundaries and we worked together as a team. That Thanksgiving night was extremely tense, but we went in prepared for something like that to happen. Additionally, I told my wife that all she had to do was ask, and I would cut all contact with my parents, no questions asked. She never got to the point of pulling that trigger, though that Thanksgiving did come close. You know what, I'm glad it worked out for OP in the end because that is some crazy drama, right? And honestly, I don't want to say good on OP's girlfriend at the time for staying, but man, that is a rough situation to be in. Like, to have your significant other's parents scream at you that you don't belong, you'll never be accepted, let them marry someone else, here's $100 to leave my son, blah blah blah. That is red flag city. Again, I'm glad it worked out in the end, and I'm also glad to hear that Dad got help and is so much better now, so there's wins all around. So in healthcare, one of the most difficult things to deal with are family members of patients. They are understandably angry, upset, grieving, devastated, and often feel helpless. Most of the time, I try to understand this and not get too annoyed when families cause problems. But these parents were on another level. So with that said, one of my patients was an 18-year-old woman who had a pelvic infection. She got very sick and she required a stay in the hospital. She was a dream patient. She was open, honest, and a lovely person. But her parents were none of these things. Every single day, they would come in and start demanding this, that, or the other thing from the nurses on the ward. They wanted an extra bed in the room so the mom could stay overnight. They were rude to the student nurse who was doing their daughter's observations, to the point that the charge nurse moved the student nurse to a different set of patients to get her away from them. But when the doctors were around, they were the sweetest people you've ever met, right up until we were out of sight or said no to one of their requests. They were disruptive, loud, and generally obnoxious people. Thankfully, their daughter was aware of their crappy behavior, and she informed us that she didn't want them to be told anything about her condition unless she approved it. She was a legal adult, so she was entitled to her privacy. And this wasn't a huge issue to begin with, as she had shared most of the details with them. But then, her mom Googled pelvic infections, and she discovered that, gasp, sometimes they can be caused by sexually transmitted infections. Cue the dramatic music. As far as she was then concerned, we had screwed up, and we had gotten the diagnosis wrong because there was no way that there was any possibility that her girl had even thought about having sex with a boy. They then demand to see their daughter's medical records so they could prove that we were lying about this infection. Politely telling them to F off was the highlight of my week. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. They came in the next day with legal papers, trying to demand we hand over the medical records. It turns out they had lied to the lawyer because the papers were for a minor, still under the guardianship of the parents, not a grown-ass woman. When that didn't work, they then threatened to sue each of us individually. They then tried to get some crackpot alternative doctor in to check her downstairs to see if she was still, quote, pure. Thankfully, the daughter screamed bloody murder when the guy tried to examine her, which resulted in me getting to watch the security guards escort and trespass them off the premises. I honestly hope she presses charges for that. I honestly hope OP does too, because that is some wild boundary crossing, guys. Like OP said, that daughter was an adult. She can do what she wants, when she wants, without her parents getting in the way. And seriously, for the parents to come in with lawyers' documents, trying to see their daughter's medical records is absolutely nutso. And on top of that, getting a doctor to check their daughter's downstairs to see if she's still pure, mother effing heck, that is next level. I don't even know what to say, because I'm honestly baffled. There are no words to describe how wild that is. So I'm a 22-year-old female, and I have a son who's going to be 4 next month. I'm low income, so birthdays and Christmas are something I need to save for year-round. I always make a fairly big deal out of them because I never had that as a young child, due to my father's inability to spend money on anything that wasn't alcohol. When I got my first job at 16 years old, 75% of my paycheck was taken by him to support his addiction. Now with that said, on to my thieving father. It also may be worth a note that I kept this money in cash and in my house. My mom has a key to my house, and I've told her not to give my dad access to. My mom has a key because she watches my son 3 days a week while I work to cut down on childcare costs. My mom knew about the fact I was saving, and I think she let it slip to my dad, but I'm not really sure. He somehow managed to get my mom's key, and he went into my house while I was working on Thursday. He had found and stolen the money I saved for this year's Christmas and my son's birthday. Now, I knew it was him because I have security cameras on both doors and in the spare bedroom where it was all kept. They're fairly obvious security cameras. I didn't bother to even check until Friday evening though, when I was going to gather some money to get my son his present when he was at his dad's for the weekend. That's when I noticed all of it was gone, and I checked the security cameras. And sure enough, I found out it was my dad fairly quick. And here's the thing, I didn't bother contacting my mom first, I just called the police. They came and took a statement off me and went to my parents' house. In the span of maybe 36 hours, my dad had managed to spend upwards of 250 euros on drinks. I'd imagined in a pub where it's more expensive, but I'm not for sure certain. I went to the station Saturday morning to give the CCTV footage, when I was informed that there was nothing they could do as the money seemed to have disappeared into thin air. When I called my mom and told her this, she got really angry at me because having a theft charge could cost my dad his career and get them evicted from their accommodations and all of this hullabaloo. She thinks I'm such an a-hole for calling the police before asking her what happened. Now, I don't think I am, but my dad ruined a birthday and potentially a Christmas for my son. But am I the a-hole in this situation? Yeah, I'm pretty sure a vast majority of people will say that OP is not the a-hole, like 1,000,000%. Like, OP's father is a thief, and he deserves to be treated as such. And as for mom, like, for her to even get mad at OP and saying, well, you should have called me first, and defending dad, she's the a-hole in this situation for sure. Like, what a piece of crap though, stealing from your own child. In my opinion, OP should take the key back from mom. But honestly, that might cause even bigger problems because OP says that mom's currently saving her money by watching her child. Guys, let me know your thoughts on this. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, I know it's been 3 days, but it's an r/malicious compliance, where airport Karens are harassing federal officers. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.